Christine, turn it sideways. Okay. Oh, you got it. Okay, great.
See, that's really nice.
Hold on, guys.
You just mute the other camera. But that's great.
Yeah,
hey, Christine.
Okay, right. 6 guys.
Yep, now there's no reverberation in the room, but you can see everybody. Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. Where's Mari? Here. Okay, come on over. Pull up the chair. Okay,
oh, that's nice. We are streaming live on Facebook. Hey, Ricky.
We are live.
We are, and guess what? The doctors, plural, are in. Hey, Dr. Alexis.
The doctor's in. The doctor's in.
Hey, Ricky.
1 second. We are live. We are live.
We are.
Okay. Here we are. We're live on Facebook. We are in Martha's Vineyard. And Mo is at her house and on her farm, but I'm in Martha's Vineyard with this room full of lovely people, and hopefully more will come in as we go, with my granddaughter Belle, who turned 5 yesterday. And the doctor is in. We've never, I guess we've sort of done this before, but not with such a big crowd. And everybody wave to the camera. They can see you over there.
Oh my goodness, I can see everybody, all these pink tables, all these beautiful faces and smiles. And it's really wonderful to have you guys join us for our Magic Touch anniversary party, because we're not a party with a purpose, we're a purpose with a party, as we like to call it, right, Ricky?
Yes, we are a purpose with a party, and we love to have parties, but we love to talk about health. And we're here, you know, we're having ice cream, but Belle wants to have ice cream for the party. No, we're here to talk about health. And you know, Mo, we always talk about how Black families don't talk about health. And you guys are all on vacation. This is a perfect time to talk about health, right? You're with your families, you're with your friends. This is the perfect time to talk about your A1C and your PSA and your blood pressure. And when was your last mammogram? And challenge your friends and your family and talk about what's going on with your bodies. We only have one of these things, right?
You know, Ricky,
and it's only here for a time.
I think you're right. And I think it's really, it's a good time to sort of go around and have people, if they don't mind sharing, like, what are some of the reasons why we don't like to talk about our health? Like, this is a really good conversation to dig into, because different families have different reasons. Sometimes it's shame, sometimes it's some other things, but what are some of the reasons why historically maybe we don't like to talk about health? Because then we can target some campaigns and some education towards some of those reasons maybe.
Anybody want to answer? Most saying, like, why don't we talk? Go for it.
I think a lot of times people
come up here.
And we can repeat your response too if you just want to call it out and you don't want to come up. But we love to see your faces and hear your stories.
I think a lot of times people don't talk about health. My name is Renee Robinson. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I think a lot of times people don't talk about health is because they don't have the resources. And they don't want to ask somebody to help them. And they just like suffer alone. Even if they have a great job, sometimes their job doesn't provide adequate health care. And they know they need something, but what they need is, it's just exorbitant in healthcare and the cost. I think that's a lot of things. And then also, if they're seen as the lucky ones, the ones that got out, the ones that are successful, they're supposed to provide that healthcare for everybody else. And they're honestly just trying to make it with the cost of healthcare. So I think that the cost, like, pay our doctors. We need to pay these people who went to school and they're specialized and they know what to do. So I don't think the cost for medical care for our providers need to be lower, but I think that the insurance companies need to be able to figure out some way to make sure that people need that people get the care they need without mortgaging their house, without like sacrificing food or whatever. So I think that's why people sometimes don't talk about health.
Did you say your name was Renee?
Yes.
Renee, you're absolutely right. There's like a term for that now. It's kind of a newfangled term called financial toxicity, right? And it has to do with how toxic breast cancer care, health care, period, is for people. Because even sometimes when we have insurance, doesn't mean that it covers everything, doesn't mean that we know how to utilize it. It doesn't mean that there aren't significant co-pays and and deductibles and things like that. But I want to lean into something you said, because you said, people are feeling responsible for their family members. I think there's a term for that too. We call that what? The black tax, right? You make it out, you got a great job, you got good insurance. But what is it about that suffering alone, I guess, or not telling anybody? What does that do for a person or help them to feel empowered? Because I remember my family members did it too. And I kept wondering, why don't they share that load? What is it about keeping it in that they think is helpful?
It's not helpful at all, in my opinion. But as people who have made it out, it's like, yeah, maybe I've made it out. Maybe I'm like $1 million, like is not like what it was in the 40s. So like if you have a house that's $1.5 million and you're making like 1.7 million, your family cooking them like, right, she got it, right? But they don't understand everything. So like being able to be that person to provide for all of our cousins, our aunts, our uncles, our sisters, our brothers, it's a lot. It's a lot. And the medical field just needs to be able to understand that some of these costs, like Tylenol is like $500. I'm probably exaggerating, but in the hospital,
right. It is, and the markup is crazy. You're right.
So that's what I think, and I'll let somebody else speak. But that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Anybody else want to share? I think she makes a great point about it, and I think you kind of touched on it a little bit too in terms of that superwoman thing. We all have the gold crown and the purple cape, and we don't want to show anyone, the people that we care for that we can't take care of them, and that's crazy. I mean, I think that we try to take on all these battles and take on all the weight of our families, and who feels that? Anybody feel like you have to be the strong one in the family? And my daughter's raising her hand. You want to talk, Amanda? Say something. I think that, it's the mother. Well, she has 3 kids under 5, and the 5-year-old just turned 5 yesterday. So it's a lot, right? Right. Yeah. You want to talk, Mari?
I was just gonna ask.
Do you know Mari Green, our awesome singer?
I was gonna add. I remember having this very overwhelming feeling with my diagnosis that I did something wrong. What did I eat wrong? What did I not do? And at this sort of running list in my mind. And I think people don't necessarily want to divulge that to anyone because it means that you just maybe don't have that thought process together. And that was the load I put on myself. I finally got beyond it. I finally began to grapple with the fact that this could have just happened. There's no rhyme or reason, and then move forward from it. But I think that is a big weight and burden that people carry, that maybe I did this. Maybe I because we just get that messaging through everything, every magazine. Don't eat this, eat these things because they could keep you from getting breast cancer. And I was singing professionally, I was dancing professionally, I was like fit, I was doing, eating well, and this is what happened. So it just really got on. I had to get out of my own way on it.
You raise a really good point, Mari, because I think that we talk a lot about cancer prevention when the correct term is probably risk reduction, right?
Yeah.
Like I got patients who, you know, they're vegetarian, they're vegan, they're pescatarian, they exercise 5 times a week, they have, you know, 0.5% body fat, they drink alkaline water, all the things, right? And breast cancer still finds them too. And so you can't internalize that blame or shame. I don't care if you felt the lump and you sat on it, if you smoked, or you drank, and you did whatever, and your risk factors, it's still not your fault. And I think you're right. People internalize that and they think, well, maybe I did something, or I should have said something sooner, or for whatever reasons. Yeah.
Well, it goes back to this superwoman, like I'm supposed to have this figured out. And, you know, no, this is something that just has come, and now you're going to deal with this point forward. But yeah, it's a lot.
Well, you know, 1 in 8 women will get breast cancer. So if you look around your circle of friends and count them out, right? And if you look at Black women under 30, Black women under 30 get breast cancer at 4 times the rate of white women. Mm-hmm. Black women under 35 get breast cancer at twice the rate of white women and die at 3 times the rate. Black women under 50 die at twice the rate of white women. The statistics for Black women are crazy. And we now know that there's a growing body of data that's validating that a Black breast cancer cell looks different from a white breast cancer cell. And so the drugs that we have as standard of care were tested on who? White women. So we're really on this mission, and this is why we're here in even Martha's Vineyard to talk about the importance of research and the importance of Black women participating in clinical trials. Because right now we're only participating at a 3% rate. So that means the drugs that we have that are being made right now for us,
Not for us.
they're not being made for us. Not for us. So these two, you know, badass women, you know, are survivors. This is Dr. Alexia.
Hi.
Daphne.
Hey, Dr. Alexia. Dr. Regina is in the chat too. One of our medical advisors, Dr. Regina Hampton, breast surgeon extraordinaire, and she's reminding everybody that the number 1 and 2 risk factors for breast cancer, being a woman and having breasts and getting older, right? Being a woman and getting older. And so we need to come to terms with that. It's like I tell my patients, we didn't start out wearing these, right? I didn't start out. We started out with maybe 20/20 vision. And next thing you know, as we get older, our cells have the propensity to make mistakes. Right. Next thing you know, we're in transition lenses and bifocals and cheaters and all kinds of things. I'm doing this now, like looking over my glasses to see. Because I can't.
we also have a few men in the room, and so for men, male breast cancer is 1% of breast cancer.
Less than 1%. That's right.
1%. But guess what? Black men die at a 66% higher rate than white men breast cancer. And also a lot of the genetic, so about 5% of breast cancer is genetic. There's a gene that's called the BRCA1 or 2, right? You may have heard of that gene. And so that gene can be passed on from a woman or a man, right? So you may not have it, but you could pass that gene on to your daughter and she could have breast cancer. So it's really important if someone has breast cancer in your family or even other cancers in your family, prostate, colon, to get genetic testing so that you can protect your family.
Oh, I was going to ask you about the genetic testing.
Yeah.
Is there a high cost to that?
So if you have cancer in your family, it should be free in your insurance. So, and really it's a very simple test. You spit in a cup. So they're asking about, there's a cost for genetic testing. So you may have to, I mean, to me, you just fight for whatever you want, go to your insurance company, fight, get your doctor to write notes. To me, one of the things we try to teach people is be your best advocate. So if you think you should have genetic testing, fight till you get it.
Yeah.
And make sure you can get it. But usually it starts with the person who has cancer. Like I had cancer, so I had the test. I don't have any mutations, so my children are safe. However, maybe because we don't know what the genetics are for Black women. Like, you know, with the genetic testing, it was tested on who? Here we go. Yeah. Right. So I had triple negative breast cancer, which Black women get at 3 times the rate of white women, and we don't really know why. And now we have some research that kind of from Ghana showing that there could be a genetic mutation that could be causing triple negative in Black women. So we're in a position where we need to really advance the science in every way that we can.
Yeah. Can I touch
Yeah,
on
yeah.
genetics thing? So everybody knows the BRCA gene mutation because it was sort of popularized or brought to public attention with Angelina Jolie's diagnosis. But there are other genes that are associated with breast cancer as well as other cancers. So I have a PALB2 mutation and I have an ATM gene variant of undetermined significance. When a gene in a Black person is identified as being of undetermined significance, it might actually be clinically relevant because the standard gene panel is not from people who look like us. It's a pooled, genetic population from a white population, right? So my ATM gene is mutated, but my doctors cannot say if it's associated with cancers or not because there's not enough information on my particular variant. The PALB2 gene mutation that I have that is known to be associated with breast cancer and specifically breast cancer at a younger age and having a higher propensity to have cancer in both breasts, which is what I had, is also associated with pancreatic cancer. There may be some links to stomach and colon cancer, possibly skin, but not the same association with ovarian cancer like we see with the BRCA gene mutation. I started finding lumps in my breast from a very young age at 21, and they were benign up until I had cancer at 37. But before I got diagnosed with breast cancer, I wanted to cut my breast off. I wanted to have a prophylactic surgery. And I didn't come up with that on my own. Actually, my primary care doctor suggested it. And she was the first person to suggest it, even though I was already under the care of a breast surgeon who did not look like me and a breast oncologist long before I had cancer. And so when I inquired about having a genetic mutation, since they wouldn't just cut my breast off because I asked, I was told that I was not a candidate for a genetic test. And I was told that I wasn't a candidate incorrectly because I didn't have a strong family history of breast cancer. But what I did have was a strong family history of prostate cancer, which my grandfather died of a very aggressive prostate cancer. And that was enough to have me genetically tested. My father also had prostate cancer, and he had it 20 years younger than his father had prostate cancer. And my grandmother had colon cancer, and that much we knew before I was diagnosed. We did the same thing that any family in my situation or our situation would do, go back and ask more questions once I had the breast cancer diagnosis. And we found a spotty history of either uterine or ovarian cancers. My grandmother had a hysterectomy fairly young for reasons we don't know because nobody talked about it. So we got to talk about these things. And when I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 37 in both of my breasts, my doctor said, well, you need genetic testing because you shouldn't have breast cancer at 37. And you certainly shouldn't have it in both of your breasts. So I got my genetic diagnosis retrospectively. I could have pre-vived my cancer. I could have had a prophylactic surgery, but my request was not heard. My request was inaccurately not honored, and I didn't know what I know now. So to answer your question about the cost, so what an insurance company is billed versus what you pay out of pocket can be very different. So I was under the impression that genetic testing was thousands of dollars, only to find out that if I wanted, I could have just applied directly for a test as a patient, not even as a physician. And if I was paying out of pocket, it might have cost me somewhere between $150 and $270. So it is worth it, right? I would have given that money 10 times over to save my health and not have to deal with breast cancer. Renee had her hand up and said, "Well, ask you a question."
And so when you were tested benign, if you didn't go back, you would have been.
I would be dead.
SOL.
Yeah.
And so with your family history, why do they just say you're benign, good? Like, is there anything that we can do to base family history and I'm going to call it a false positive because you did end up having it. And so how do we prevent that? Like, where's the delta?
So I think the thing to do is to demand. I think I was a little too polite with my colleagues who were taking care of me. I sort of inappropriately humbled myself and I didn't push because I was told that I would be taken care of by the best of the best. I think when in doubt, get a second opinion. I didn't think I needed a second opinion because I'm being taken care of where I work in the community I serve with who is supposed to be top notch in this field. And they didn't even suggest I go for a second opinion until I already had the cancer. And then it was, a matter of, what type of surgery do you want, So get a second opinion and get it early. You don't need to wait until you have a diagnosis or absolutely need a surgery. We should be questioning the care that we're getting.
Yeah,
if it's
prevention over the cure.
Yeah. And what we're learning though in our community, our level of health literacy is so low. It's frightening, and we've been on the road doing these sessions for the last 10 weeks, and we're learning that people just don't even know what to ask. They don't know what they don't know. They don't understand all the connections, but guess why? Because they're not talking about it. And so that's why it's so important to talk about what's going on in your family so that you can see if you do have a risk, a genetic risk, right? And then you can do something to take precautions. But
Ricky, I want to poll the audience. I want to poll the audience and ask, even for, let's say, a biopsy or other results, lab results, whatever it is, how many people in this room have ever gotten a second opinion?
Second opinion for anything.
For anything.
I would say about half. No,
I'm looking. Yep, looks like maybe about a third to a half of the room.
Yeah.
And then how many people feel like you would be a little bit nervous or afraid to ask your doctor or to say, I want a second opinion? How many people feel like that would be a challenge to say? Because I think that's an area too where we need to learn to use our voices. As Black women, we use our voices for a lot of things, but we don't always use them in those ways. But I think that fear, I have a lot of patients who say, well, I don't want to offend you, doctor. I'm sure your expertise is da-da-da-da-da, but I was thinking about getting a second opinion. And I stop them right there and I say, I think that's a great idea. Let's talk about this. Let me tell you who I would go to. Let me tell you what questions to ask. Let me tell you what might be different or what they might say compared to what I might say. You go see Dr. Lola down at Penn. That's my homie. Let me tell you what Dr. Lola's going to tell you, and kind of help them to navigate that. But I feel like
not every doctor is like
not every doctor is like that. But not every patient is willing to be like, excuse me, let me, we just kind of go on our own and maybe make those connections. But how many people feel empowered enough to ask for that second opinion?
Yes.
It's hard. I thought it was like the Florence Nightingale effect when I was diagnosed, because several people said, go get a second opinion. And it was almost like the person that had delivered the bad news to me, I had to be loyal to. Mm-hmm. And so again, I had to say, like think about it, but it was, I went for a second opinion just because it was like, everybody was saying like, well, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you just have somebody else? You can always go back to that doctor if they were correct or you didn't vibe, with the second person, but at least go. At least hear somebody else out.
Yeah. Danny just joined us up here.
Hi, everyone. Talked about fear for 5 minutes, right? So that's what I wanted to talk about when you were like, why don't people of color go out? It's fear. There's a lot of things in our community. Like I remember growing up, we didn't talk about cancer. If somebody had cancer, oh, you had cancer? Like I only thought white people had cancer. Like it was like that ridiculous, And then me myself on my mother's and my father's side, there's breast cancer on one, and there's ovarian cancer on the other. So when I after those things happened in my life, I started on my own getting tested. And then they're like, oh, you're a candidate for genetic testing. I was like, oh, I'm not getting that test. Like, because Angelina Jolie had just made some aggressive choices. And somebody was like, if you're not going to make an aggressive choice, if you're not going to do, like, don't even bother. And I was
That's not true.
That was another opinion.
Yeah.
Like, whatever. And for me, I was like, you know what? But I had a small situation where it was biopsy taken care of, so I didn't need a second opinion after. And things have been good ever since. But people are terrified.
Yeah.
That's what.
It's
Yeah.
fear of the unknown. The fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
That's what we're learning too with even participation in clinical trials. Like you're not going to jump off that bridge if you don't have deeper water. You're not going to open that door unless you know what's on the other side. And we have so much medical mistrust, earned medical mistrust, you know, from Tuskegee, right? So we earn that mistrust. However, if you think about the way we're talking about clinical trials, like who has an iPhone 13? Who's got an iPhone 13, right? Who's got a brand new car?
Who's got electric vehicle, right? So that's like
Who's got electric vehicle, right? Think about it. So you're buying science.
Yeah.
You're buying science. Who's got the M1 Apple computer? Who's got the latest Mac, the latest HP computer, right? Who got their house remodeled and got the latest whatever thing in your new house, right? So you're buying science. You're buying science for your phone. You're buying science for your car. You're buying science. Why wouldn't you buy science for your body? And so in a clinical trial, we know that we're getting better outcomes. You're getting more attention.
Mhm.
You have more doctors looking at you. You have more scans. You know, if you're on normal chemo, you may go for 3 months without getting scanned to know whether it's helping your cancer. In a clinical trial, you probably get a scan after a month. And if it's not working, they change it.
That's where
Go
the
ahead.
education comes in, though, because I think people don't believe that the quality they get in a clinical trial is superior or at least as good as, but you get more attention. I think they're afraid that it's more experimentation on them, and that by being experimental, it means less widely understood and therefore more confusion about it. And they're trying to avoid that confusion. But that's where this education, and you know, like I'm wearing this shirt, it says when we trial, right? And we know that here, let me go down. There we go. Not that I want to show off my boobs, but when we trial, whenwetrial.org talks about these things, right? Like what happens when you commit to a trial, and why a trial is not just, let's just see what, you know, throw it against the wall and see what sticks. Like there's a whole science behind this that we need to understand better so that we can be more engaged.
Yeah, we hear like, oh, we're gonna get the sugar pill and die. There is no sugar pill in cancer trial. And you're gonna get way better care. So that's why we're trying to educate people. And we also know that white doctors are not gonna invite Black patients to participate in clinical trials. They're just not, it's not happening. And so unless you ask for it yourself, and frankly, you know, when you get that first diagnosis, they say, yes, Ricky, you have cancer. You know, you always, after that, you hear wah, wah, wah. You don't hear anything else. But when you first get cancer, it's really when you should be considering a trial as part of a treatment option. Here are your treatment options. You can do this, this, this. It's usually chemotherapy and radiation and surgery or some combination of that. But a trial should be part of that if you're doing chemotherapy. So
you can ask to be part of it.
Yeah. 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 So our website is whenwetrial.org. If you go to that website, or you can sign up on any of these iPads, you know, it has all the information. And we also learned that it's the message comes from breastfeed. So you'll see we have a lot of videos on our website because we know that we can be a voice of trust. You know, you're not going to trust the doctor. You're going to trust doctors like Dr. Alexi and Dr. Mo, but probably not the ones you're going to. And so you trust
So
them.
much study and care. Like
Yeah.
2020,
Yes.
I had kidney cancer, 2 surgeries, and my treatment was horrible.
Come up here. Come talk.
Something about in 2020, my treatment was horrible. And we got to talk about that because treatment during COVID was horrible for so many people.
Yes,
It was really
well, a
unfortunate.
couple weeks ago, we were at Urban League and we did mammograms. We did 27 mammograms that day. 26 of the women had not had a mammogram for 2 years because of COVID, 2 or 3 years because of COVID. Not good. But go
So
ahead.
in 2020, I was diagnosed by accident. Like I had a car accident. I drove a DLK Mercedes, loved the car, loved it, 350. Got in the car accident. Person rear-ended me, had an MRI, was diagnosed with, they saw something on my kidneys, and that's So I say saving grace. I now drive a road, which I'm like, whatever. But anyway, but that saved my life, right? Because they diagnosed me with kidney cancer. And it was in 2020. There was no vaccination. I'm like, what? You want me to do what? My family can't be there. It was horrible. Easy. It was horrible. And so when I went in for my surgery, I was alone.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I was not an advocate, like they just saw me as a Black woman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. Look, I understand who you are. Like, no, I'm not taking the opiates. I'm not doing that. I'm just not, you're not gonna hit me up where I'm addicted when I leave because there's so much pain.
Right.
And I'm like, there needs to be other treatments. Give me something else. And they were mad at me. The nurses and even my surgery staff, well, not really surgery, but the people, the aftercare people while I was in the office, the hospital, they were just mad. And I'm like, no, what is this you're giving me? No, I'm not doing that. And I was lucid enough to say, no, I don't want this. And and then when I said no, they're like, you need to get up and walk. You need to walk right now. I'm like, it's been 12 hours. And like I felt literally kicked out of the hospital. But I'm like, you know what? My support staff, my family, they're like, you know what? Let's get up out of here. And we treated myself at home. So the disparity on the way they treat people who are ill in the hospital that really need treatment, it's crazy. And I experienced, and I had twice. I had a surgery in September. I'm sorry, in July and October, because I had kidney cancer on both of my kidneys.
Wow.
And so I'm living right now with a quarter one kidney and half one kidney. But I'm living, I'm alive.
You're living.
I'm here. Don't treat us very well in the hospital. And I'm educated. We're all educated.
Right.
We wouldn't be here.
Right.
And
Doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. They
Right.
see Black women.
Right. So Dr. Regina's.
That's exactly the thing, right? It doesn't matter how educated we are. It doesn't matter how well-to-do we are. We have to remember that we exist in Black bodies and Black women's bodies. And this system was not created to serve us. And in fact, our system is so messed up that medical students still in 2022 believe that Black people can tolerate more pain than white people. Believe that, we're exaggerating our pain, or don't see us as a human being that's in pain. They see us as an angry Black woman. They see a Latina as being in status Hispanicus, and a white woman is just a lady in pain.
Right.
And so we have to be mindful of that. And
we say that, Doc.
Super communicative about what is going on. And sometimes it requires that we learn to speak the language that they understand.
And say, no, I don't want to.
Yeah, and to advocate and keep advocating and to know who to call, right? Call the charge nurse. If the charge nurse is not helping, call patient guest relations. If that person is not helping or available, call the ADN. You don't even need to know who that is, but usually if you gotta call the ADN, heads is gonna roll and things are gonna happen.
Got that
But
right.
just knowing that you can call. So just say,
Patient
Dr.
safety and patient satisfaction are key.
Dr.
If you're just joining us, you're watching The Doctor Is In on blackdoctor.org, and guess what? The doctors are in. It's our favorite breast surgeon, Dr. Regina. Yes, we got Dr. Alexia in Martha's Vineyard with Ricky. And we got a whole room full of people.
Yes. My original oncologist told me that she would not take my port out. After I finished chemo, I was good. And she my scar. She said, I'm not taking it out because you had triple negative, it's going to come back. And I went to her when I moved to Maryland to say, can you flush my port? Like, why do you have a port? And I said, my doctor told me it's going to come back. Like, wow, you are good. Meet me at the OR on Wednesday. And she took it out.
I love it. Hey, Doc.
She's like, you don't need
Hi, everyone.
So my doctor, right? Right. So So Regina, we're in this room with these lovely, lovely, beautiful people. You can see them on the screen and see them here. And Martha's been here.
Everyone.
And he's a badass. He's like a badass doctor in DC. So you told me this the other day. I saw her the other day, and she told me that what % of your practice? Talk about your young women.
So in the Washington, D.C. area, we have a very high incidence of breast cancer in young African-American women. So in my practice, which is in Prince George's County, which is just outside of Washington, D.C., about 30% of my practice are young African-American women. In fact, just this week, I have a 38-year-old that I just diagnosed and a 35-year-old that I just diagnosed this week alone.
But she's seeing patients under 35, under 40. And you would never
talk
get
about that. Dr. Hampton was burning up the chat, and we were talking about the guidelines, right? Dr. Hampton, tell us about the screening guidelines as they are, and then one society that has a different recommendation.
So the general screening guidelines are to get mammograms starting at age 40. Unless you have a family history, then you should start 10 years earlier. The American College of Radiology has deemed both Black women and Jewish women as being high risk. And so they're recommending to start with a risk assessment at age 30 for Black women. So what that means is, I think all Black women need to go find a breast provider, go in, have that early conversation, try and find out your family history, because many of those women will probably qualify to start doing mammogram screenings at younger ages. And then we could catch some of these women at earlier stages.
Yeah. I know Amanda's been trying to get a mammogram, but she's been pregnant for the last 5 years. Oh, 3D, you guys, 3D. I'll let the doc talk about 3D. 3D is essential, but I'll let them tell you why.
Why is it that insurance companies still have a mandate that they're only going to pay for it 2D?
So if you go to a facility that only provides 3D, then they have to cover you. That's the way around it. But Black women, the numbers are, I believe the numbers are, we're 4 to 5 times more likely to have dense breast. Yeah. And when you have dense breast, you're 6 to 8 times more likely to get breast cancer. Or something like those numbers may be a little screwed, but
31%, 31 to 37% higher density, right? So the density is the thickness of the breast. And I'll let Dr. Hampton talk more about tomosynthesis, that word tomosynthesis. But the breast density is like, I tell patients it's like static on the TV screen. Remember console TVs? Like, I'm old, I'm dating myself, but the more static or snow you got on a TV screen, the harder it is to see the picture. And the same thing with the breast density. But Doc, talk about the 3D mammos a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, so I think 3D mammograms should be the standard. And thankfully, we're seeing them more and more in a lot more facilities, and there are very few of the others. So if you think of the mammogram as like the pages of a book. So if you get a 3D mammogram, you can look at the cover of the book, you can look at the back cover of the book. But if you do a regular mammogram, you may only see the center page. But what's going on between the center page and the front cover of the book, and what's going on between the center page and the back cover of the book? So what a 3D mammogram does is it allows us to take pictures through the breast. So then when we look at them on a screen, we're looking page by page through the breast tissue in order to find something very small that might not come out on a standard mammogram for another 2 or 3 years. So it really allows us to find a lot of things earlier. And of course, when we find them earlier, that means we're finding it at an earlier stage. And then, you know, we're going to have more survivors.
So they're saying, yeah, so basically they can see on a 3D what you probably wouldn't see for 2 to 3 years on a standard mammogram.
Yeah. So you still be in stage 1? Or
yeah, you could be stage 0, you could be, state, a much earlier stage, right? So it's better to do that and know early. You can't prevent breast cancer, you can early detect it. So the earlier you can detect it, the better chance you have to save yourself. So So anybody have any stories they want to share about cancer, about health, or why are you smiling? Come on. Okay. Your name?
Desiree.
Desiree. Hey, Desiree.
I wanted to share that my mother's a nurse. She also got cancer. And one of the things she advised me as I was going through my, life, and I was blessed to have her there, was she was a nurse, and she would say whenever I was going through things, and I had blood clots in both lung chambers that went undiagnosed for a long time. And she would chide me when I would go to the doctor by saying that, you have to make it sound worse than you made it, because they're not taking you seriously. And so I think one of the best things I've gotten from her is a commitment to document our family stories.
Yes.
And in the same way, and not just our family stories, our family health stories. So I come from a large family, both sides. And one of the things that we have put into practice is documenting the health stories.
That's great.
Of them. And I offer that up as just a suggestion, especially for our kids that are coming behind. And a lot of our histories, we're not living in the same places that we normally live with our families. And so it's been something that has really helped us.
That's great. There's actually on the hhs.gov website, they have a family tree, a health family tree template that you can, it looks like a family tree, but you can fill in who had what in your family and kind of try to start to paint this picture of, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, there's a lot of cancer over here. There's like a lot of diabetes over here, but it gives you an opportunity, even on your family tree that you have. We're all making them in the Bible. Put the in the Bible,
the big Bible.
Put the disease that somebody died of or what they're suffering from in that picture to give yourself, and then you can also start conversation. So I harass my family all the time, like when was your last mammogram, what's your A1C, and they hate me, but I don't care because we have to talk about it. We have to talk about it.
And I think just as Black families are.
One second. Go ahead, Margina.
No, I was just going to say, as Black families are doing their cookouts and getting together, their summer together,
family reunions,
go to Staples, get some index cards, and everybody fill out an index card and put it in the box, and somebody take all that information, put it together, and disseminate it. So, that's something easy. And, you don't get a rib unless you give us your index card. So we really have to press our family members.
For you.
Take their A1C if they have no history of diabetes.
You think? Well, you should. I mean, I think I get A1C as part of my normal blood work. Don't you get an A1C check? Should you get your A1C check if you don't have a history of diabetes in your family?
Yeah. If you're on a standard American diet, I would say, yeah. If your blood sugar is 1 point above normal or right at 100, yeah. If you have any,
almost like 5.4
to 5.7.
Okay. But you can ask for that when you get normal blood work at your annual checkup. Ask for that.
It's not a bad idea because so many people are asymptomatic, right? Like you could be pre-diabetic for an awful long time with no symptoms and not realize it. And so especially I think for Black women, it's a good number to know and to have, especially if it's normal, that's great. Then you can continue doing what you're doing. But if that number is elevated, then you need to maybe change some things in your diet, and it can give you an early indicator that you're headed down a road and you need to make some changes, because that's what we want. We want to know early. We don't want to know when we get diabetes. We want to know early so we can reduce the risk. And it doesn't mean that everybody in your family was upfront and honest or even knew they had diabetes. So that's the other thing. You make assumptions because nobody said they had diabetes and nobody had the sugar. But guess what? Chances are somebody might have had it.
Right. And even my stepdad, he kept saying he was pre-diabetic for years. He was diabetic. He just didn't want to give us the coconut cake. But wait a minute, so we called the doctor. We had a comment over here and we'll get to you.
That's clear on a question because I hear it talking about mammograms from 45 disclosure, and I've been getting my mammogram since I was 40, but I feel like I get the mammogram and then they read it and they're like, you're really dense breast. And they're like, Black women always have dense breast. And then they send me for an ultrasound. And I'm like, what's the recommendation there? Is it like all Black women should get a mammogram and an ultrasound? Did you go with one or with other? I don't really know, like, what's the trend or what is?
Regina, what do you think?
So, I mean, it sounds like you're getting the right treatment. So when you have dense breast, then you do have the right to ask for an ultrasound. And if they still have questions, then you can ask for a breast MRI. So with you having the dense breast, sounds like, you know, they have some trouble. So they add the ultrasound on top of that. You know, if you still have concerns, you can always ask for a breast MRI as well.
But I think you're good. That sounds really good.
Yeah.
So I would just say, you know, stay with that.
I agree with that.
In my patients who have dense breast, like if I see in the year before or in their first ultrasound, in their first ultrasound that they had dense breast, regardless of race, regardless of age, I always couple it with an ultrasound. And now that the tomosynthesis or the 3D mammography is becoming more readily available, then we'll do that and just see, like, the more information, the better, you know.
Yeah.
Nobody ever died too much medical information.
Right.
I also like the exposure radiation and that kind of stuff. Like
it's not worse than cancer. It's not worse than cancer.
And it won't give you cancer.
The benefit outweighs the risk. So if you look at the amount of radiation from a 3D mammogram, and Dr. Hampton, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time I checked, because I was trying to find like real life equivalents, it's equivalent to about 3 months of walking around radiation from microwaves, TVs, airports, sun exposure. So like 3 months of ambient everyday radiation. So unless you're getting mammograms every 3 months, the benefit outweighs the risk. So it's not like you're going to have, you know, undue excess radiation. It's that it can detect it so early that it's beneficial to you. And, you know, they put that disclaimer at the bottom of the mammograms that say the sensitivity of mammography is diminished for heterogeneously dense or greater breasts, right? And you're like, well, what do I have? It says I have dense breasts. Well, you probably always did, but we're required by law to tell you how dense your breasts are now. So you should be saying, okay, what category of density am I in? And then talk to your gynecologist, your PCP, your breast doctor, whomever, about what imaging you should get based on that density. But how many people in the room know their breast density? But how many people don't know their breast density, right? Like we might see some hands raised.
I know, if you think about anything that you do, any kind of medical procedure you have, don't just accept it. Just ask any question you can think of. You know, why are you doing this? What's the point? Like, you know, and if you have trouble, you want to ask questions, call us and we'll help you ask questions. What's your name, man?
My name is Dolores Grove. And as I look around this room, all of you look so beautiful. Please excuse my appearance.
Beautiful.
I was down there at the tennis court just watching tennis, but I had planned to come up here.
You came.
So please forgive me.
You're beautiful.
But you guys look so good. I was embarrassed. I almost turned around. Now I'm going to tell you my little story. I had lung cancer, and this month, 2 years ago, I had surgery. But I got to tell you about it because we're talking about cancer and things we ignore sometimes. I have, through my teacher's retirement system, they send somebody out to check you. And I let them do that because it's free, because it goes in it. And the lady, when she checked my heart, she said, you have a little bit of a rapid heartbeat. I said, really? And she said, yes. So then when I went to my primary physician, I said, I was told that I have somewhat of a rapid heartbeat. And she checked me and she gave me an EKG. She said, it's okay. I said, but you know what? I want a little more information. And I told her, I want to go to a cardiologist. So I went to the cardiologist, and when he was checking, he did a scan and all. He said, oh my God, you've got a lump up under your heart. I said, what? I'm not a smoker, never been a smoker. I used to hang out when I was younger in the, the bar, at the bowling alley. And my husband was a smoker. And I had pneumonia and bronchitis a couple of times. And I'm just saying all of this to tell you, You don't have to do certain things to get something else. So the cardiologist set me up an appointment with the thoracic surgeon. He did a scan and he said, I think you have a cancer. He said, but I want to check. He did a biopsy of my lung. When he did the biopsy, he found out that I did have cancer. So they took out my left lobe. They got my boobs. But they took out my left lobe. They said they got it all. I didn't have to have radiation. I didn't have to have chemo. Just removed it. So my left lobe is gone, but I still have the other. And you don't even realize what you have sometimes until you go through something else. So then he told me, he said, he said, we got it all. He said, I want you for the next 2 years to have a scan and eat every 6 months. So I have a scan. You go follow up, ladies, no matter what, follow up on things and demand things that you feel you need to have done. And so after my 6-month checkup 2 weeks ago, he said, you don't have to come back for a year. I'm considered a lung cancer survivor, but my lung is gone that was bad. And I'm just telling you that because there's some things you may have going on that you need to check. And I just, as I sat back there with my outfit on and looking out, you know, I just had to share that because I think God has told me to share it.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, thank you for sharing that because, you know, we seeing more and more people with lung cancer who are non-smokers and we don't know why. And we're trying to figure out, is there a potential hereditary component that we may have not been aware of? It might not be on the radar, but we're starting to become more and more aware of this fact that people are getting lung cancer without that smoking history, but how important it is just to follow up with it and to stay with it. Because sometimes, you know, keeping up with your health can be a full-time job, but it's probably the most important job we have.
You know, just in thinking about the unknowns, what was the exposure, right? Was it secondhand smoke? Was it environmental toxicity, which affects Black people more? Was it, you know, some sort of treatment that somebody had as a child or as a younger adult that predisposed them to a cancer? Sometimes things like radiation, or if you had, you know, repeated chest x-rays because you were an asthmatic, you need to be worried about your thyroid and other things. There's, you know, everything has a risk, but things have a benefit. So whenever we're seeking medical care or whenever we're being offered procedures, whether they're screening or prophylactic or diagnostic, whatever, in medicine, the general rule is the thing that you're doing has to have more benefits than it has risk, right? And so that is probably the thing to follow. So we don't always have a risk factor for a cancer. I certainly didn't think I had a risk factor, and neither did anybody around me. People were like, what, you, of all of us? You didn't drink, you didn't smoke, you didn't do nothing. But here I was. But when I think about it, I think that there was a lot of environmental toxicity. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I think there's a lot of Brooklyn. We're gonna act up when we get together. Sorry. But so environmental toxicity, and then I moved to an area in Long Island where there is an exorbitant amount of breast cancer that is not genetic. So they believe that it's environmental. So one of the things that they're discussing is it chemicals in our water, which is something we all have to worry about. So there's a number of things that we just have to be mindful of. You know, we can't, you know, walk around in gas tanks and, you know, only buy bottled water. That's not necessarily the answer. We just have to have an awareness that we have to be mindful of our bodies. We have to not be bashful. We have to advocate for ourselves. Yeah. I think that's, you know, the best that we can do, right?
So we have another doctor in the house. Dr. Keith just joined us.
Hey.
Well, we have all these
that's awesome. Hi there.
I know.
Hey, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
So Dr. Keith runs the prostate cancer advocacy group, Ben. And so he deals with a lot of men issues, which we can talk about because we know that the women in the men's lives are really ruling the house on what happens.
Well, the correct name is the chief medical officer.
Thank you.
All right.
Medical officer.
Right.
Top.
Well, I wanted to say, yeah, I'm glad to be here and see all these lovely smiles and lovely ladies. And I see a few men, but you know, all these roses among thorns. I didn't. So it's important that we talk about, when we talk about breast cancer, we talked about screening, but we also talked about the importance of healthy bone. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this is important is because if you look at the media, you hear osteoporosis and you think it's a disease that's associated with white, but it's not. So everything has statistics that are involved. There may be more white women that suffer from osteoporosis, but Black women suffer from osteoporosis. And since Black women in many families, and even when there are two families, two in a family, there's a lot of heavy lifting that you're doing because you're the kind of the superwoman. Okay. And then if you break a bone, you're the last to worry about yourself.
Think about what happens if you broke a bone in your house.
In your house.
I fell on a step ladder. Think about what would happen in your life if you broke a bone. You just
yeah. So the quality of life changes, and then the household can come to a stop. So when we talk about breast cancer, the screening, we talk about treatment, but we also have to talk about after you receive treatment, because some of the treatments can influence how strong your bones are. Okay. So this is very important. And then what do you do? Do you exercise? Even when we talk about your mental health is extremely important because if you're depressed, you can release protein compounds that can weaken your bone. Smoke. You can drink now. I didn't take that away, but you may drink a glass and a half. I did. I'll clarify that. And it was a glass and a half per day. So you know, after 12 o'clock, there's another day. But what I am seeing is it's just everything in moderation. Food, things that we know about, collard greens. Something you go back to where and what our ancestors and our relatives have eaten in the past. I mean, the healthier stuff, the green leafy vegetables. Those things are important. And we've reached a point where, we don't need to eat that stuff. No.
So important.
We don't need to report.
That's right. We don't need so important.
Yeah.
Talk about prostate.
Oh, say that again. I missed that. I want to hear it again. What about the pork?
So somebody said about pork, they're cutting out the pork and just keeping the green. Okay.
All right.
So now there's something that I want you to recognize. If what you'll start to hear in the future is something called BRCA.
We talked a little about BRCA.
Okay, so we talk about BRCA. Now, did you know that gene that's found in women, which is breast cancer BRCA1 and 2, can also be expressed in men?
We talked a little bit about that too.
So now that's the connection between the two. Genetically, in the past, it was the disease itself, where the tissue was located, where the disease was located, what part of the body. Now it's genetic. So you may have it, and your son may have the gene. Now, what do we know about prostate cancer? Black men in the room and ladies, you go back and you need to talk to some folks. Breast cancer, it's important for early detection screening. Prostate cancer is important. At age 40, not 55, not 60, 40. So let's look at it at a national level. At a minimum, between 73 to 80%, the incidence of prostate cancer is in men more than white men. Black men die at twice the level rate as white men. Now, this is where I said statistics are, it's very important for us to understand statistics, understand the math behind it. If I tell you that the incidence of prostate cancer for the United States is high in Black men, it's to a certain extent they have a tendency to dilute that number. Why? Because the majority of Black people live in 35 states. We don't live in 50. We live in 35. So when you start looking at those numbers for Black women also, when it comes to cancer, we don't live in 50 states. 98% of us are living in about 35 states. So that gives you a different perspective of how this is a crisis in our community. We have COVID, that period of time between March 13th and somewhere around June when we open this back up. There was a period where people, Black men and Black women, who didn't get scanned, who didn't get treatment. Now, after the 21st, after June, when it kick-started America back up and everybody's getting their treatment, other groups went back up to their normal rate. I can tell you right now, certain procedures for prostate cancer, Black men were still at 4% when their other men were back at the 26 to 28% level for prostate cancer surgery. So we're anticipating that this is going to be the same thing for Black women also. We can tell you right now that Black women are behind in the screening and Black men are behind in the screening. So we're going to have to talk to each other. And you're, again, there's a lot of weight put on a Black woman's shoulder, but you are the chief medical officer. And passing that message on to your loved one, to your son, to your husband, to someone who is close to you, uncle, father, all of them need to know that it's time to get back on track. We have a major disparity that exists, the largest racial disparity. And what we do is break it down by county level. And I can show you whether it's, we just finished North Carolina, Georgia, we're going to do South Carolina coming up. And if you look at the county level, you'll find that the incidence for Black people, breast and prostate cancer, are even higher at the local level.
Well, that's what Dr. Hampton's saying in DC, you know, it's one of the highest levels of, one of the highest mortality rates in the country for Black women. So Dr. People, we're going to have to go off the air. We thank you so much for coming. But for our audience, we're gonna don't clap yet. Thank you. We're gonna go Facebook Live on the Touch page because we have much more to talk about. We have a little more partying to have, a lot more partying to have. But also, Monty Green, Breasty Monty Green is gonna perform in a second. So we're gonna get her on Facebook Live on at Touch BBCA on Facebook. We thank our sponsors. We thank our guests. We thank our audience.
Y'all look beautiful. We're so grateful for you being there today. Dr. Regina, thank you for jumping on. I thought you had such great information to share, and you're always, you know, you're home on the Doctor's End. Dr. Alexia, you're home on the Doctor's End, and we just thank everybody for supporting Touch for the last 2 years, because, you know, without the support and the engagement, we wouldn't have, how many women enrolling in clinical trial portals now, Ricky, how many?
We've now signed up 3,200 Black women for clinical trials.
And that's the real celebration right there. That's the party, that's the purpose. So we're so thankful to you, to Black Doctor, to our sponsors. We hope this has been relatable and reliable and real. It's what we set out to do and give you guys every Wednesday night on blackdoctor.org. The doctors are in.
The doctor's in. Rusty love. So go to our Facebook page, PBTA, and you'll have more entertainment and hang with us tonight at the vineyard. Thank you.
God
Bye,
bless
Mo.
everybody. See you next Wednesday.
Okay.
And outside, you are.
Okay.